You have always had many interests. You learn quickly. You explore deeply. You want to understand how things actually work. You don't just collect information. You connect it. You notice patterns other people overlook. Relationships that only appear when you look at things from more than one angle. And yet, when you look at your own life, it often doesn't feel like progress. It feels scattered, like you are always moving, but never quite arriving. At some point, a quiet thought settles in. Maybe I'm the problem. Not because you lack ability, but because your path doesn't move in one straight line, the way success is supposed to. Stay with this, because what feels like failure may actually be preparation for a future that no longer rewards linear minds. To understand this, you don't need advice. You need a story, not about success, not about achievement, but about how a person slowly realizes that the thing he was taught to fix was never broken. Chapter 1. When Curiosity Stops Looking Like Progress. His name is Jiro. Jiro is not confused. He is tired of explaining himself. That is why he finds himself years later sitting at the heavy wooden table in his grandparents' kitchen. This house has always felt different. No pressure, no timelines, no quiet demand to justify who he is becoming. As a child, Jiro was endlessly curious. He would immerse himself completely in interests: astronomy, drawing, electronics, languages, not casually but with real focus. He didn't skim, he didn't dabble. He learned quickly because he wanted to understand, not because he wanted to finish. And then, at a certain point, he would move on. Chapter 2. The moment curiosity became a problem. That moment was almost always misunderstood. From the outside, it looked like a lack of discipline, like impatience, like an inability to commit. You never finish what you start. You jump too much. You need to choose one thing. What nobody noticed was that Jiro didn't leave questions behind. He left with answers. The curiosity that pulled him in had done its job. But because this kind of completion has no certificate, no visible endpoint, it never counted. Slowly, the message settled in. That staying mattered more than understanding. That movement was suspicious. That curiosity needed to be controlled. And so Jiro learned something dangerous. He learned to mistrust the moment when something inside him felt complete. Chapter 3. The one place he was never measured. In this house, nobody ever corrected him. His grandmother, Aiko, never asked why he moved on. She watched, and she trusted. There is a cat here. Her name is Sora. Sora is old now. She doesn't chase endlessly. She doesn't waste energy. But when something moves, her entire body changes. Stillness, precision, total presence. She watches, she calculates, she strikes. And then, just as suddenly, she stops. She turns away, finds a warm place on the floor, sleeps. No frustration, no restlessness, no guilt. As a child, Jiro once asked why Sora never finished what she started. Aiko didn't smile. She knows when she's had enough, she said. That's not quitting, that's listening. Chapter 4. Why completion was mistaken for failure. Sitting here now, Jiro finally understands why that sentence never left him. He didn't move on because he lacked depth. He moved on because his understanding was saturated. The picture closed, the system made sense, the inner tension dissolved. But the world only recognizes one kind of learning, the kind that stays visible. Anything else gets mislabeled, unfocused, unreliable, scattered. Over time, that label becomes a mirror. And one day, without realizing when it happened, you start correcting yourself before anyone else does. Chapter 5. 2 ways of learning. Only one gets rewarded. Some people are built to go deep and stay there. They choose one direction and move downward, layer by layer, for years. That kind of depth builds mastery. It creates stability. And for a long time, the world depended on it. But there is another way of learning. People like you learn deeply as they need to understand. Not superficially, not impatiently, until the inner picture closes. And when understanding is complete, something natural happens. They move on. Not out of boredom, not out of fear, but because there is nothing left to learn there. The mistake is believing that depth only counts if it never ends. That belief turns completion into failure and movement into guilt. Chapter 6. Why this mind was always ahead of its time. For a long time, this way of thinking looked inefficient. Careers were stable. Skills lasted decades. Paths were predictable. In that world, staying mattered more than seeing. But that world no longer exists. Roles dissolve. Industries collapse. Knowledge expires. The problem is no longer how deep you can go. The problem is knowing when a system has reached its limit. People like you sense that earlier. You notice when repetition stops producing insight, when rules no longer explain reality, when staying becomes stagnation. You don't cling, you adapt. For a while, that looks like instability, until the environment changes. Then it looks like foresight. Chapter 7. The exhaustion nobody talks about. What Jiro never noticed before is how expensive this quiet self-correction had been. Not in years, in energy. Every time a new interest appeared, there was excitement first, clarity, momentum. And then, almost immediately, a second voice followed. Don't get carried away. This won't last either. You always do this. So even while learning, he was already preparing the apology. Not to others, to himself. That constant inner monitoring turned curiosity into something fragile, something temporary. He was never allowed to fully trust it, because experience had taught him how the story was supposed to end. This is what real exhaustion looks like. Not burnout from doing too much, but tension from never fully standing behind the way your mind naturally moves. Jiro realizes now that he didn't lack direction. He lacked permission. Permission to let understanding be enough. Permission to move on without shame. Permission to stop proving that his way of learning was legitimate. And the most unsettling part is how normal all of this once felt. Chapter 8. When the measurement breaks. Jiro watches Sora sleep. No second guessing. No visible effort. For the first time, he doesn't try to override himself. He doesn't ask how to become more disciplined. He doesn't search for a missing trait. He recognizes the pressure for what it always was. An external measure, repeated often enough until it turned inward. And quietly, something loosens. Not relief, not confidence, just the end of resistance. You are not wrong. You only learn to feel wrong because someone else decided what progress should look like. And once that cracks, you stop trying to fix yourself. The only question that remains is this: what kind of future actually needs a mind like yours?